REWRITTEN! Stephen's ears were filled with the sounds of his breath, his gems humming, and his heartbeat. But over all of it, nearly drowning everything else out, was the butterfly wings, chasing him as he sprinted across the beach, hugging the cliff's face. He had to get far enough away from the gems before they realized that he wasn't in the bathroom anymore and saw that he escaped. Stars, he hated this. He hated every part of this. It felt so wrong to be running away from his home, from his family. He felt like a fugitive. He was a crazy criminal who they needed to lock up. A murderer. The pain in his gem felt like he was being stabbed by a burning knife, the blade wrenching around and around, only worsening the fear, only making him more desperate to get to Connie. Everything would be fine once he found her. She'd know what to do. She always did. All of a sudden, he felt his foot catch on a stone, tumbling forwards with a yelp. He struggled in the sand, quickly rolling over onto his side and clutching his stomach again, his sides heaving with the pain. And then, out of nowhere, forceful, heated thoughts barged in on his mind. Let me handle this. I can take it. I can protect us. Go away! Stephen hollered sharply. The sand particles scattered, a miniature crater being formed where he was lying. And then he realized with a start who had just spoken to him. It was his gem. It wasn't aloud. It was in his head, shuffled deep within his thoughts, which kind of made it worse in many ways. He'd gotten emotions from it recently, a few vague ideas of phrases, but nothing like this. Not a full sentence. What? He blinked, crackling eyes wide. But it was quiet again, nothing more than the violent hum of urgency in the background. It was nothing. Clearly it was nothing. He'd imagined it. He was fine. He had to get up. He had to hurry. Stephen couldn't spend any more time thinking about what just happened. The pain pressed into him like a serrated spike, panic fluttering up into him again as he pushed himself up and kept running. Trying to reorient himself through the haze of dizziness and fright, Stephen only realized that he had run out onto the boardwalk near the Big Donut whenever he felt wood beneath his bare feet. Something felt weird about the texture. He looked down and finally realized that he was missing a sandal. He only remembered now that it had fallen off during the escape from the rebels in the palace, whenever Spinel had swung from the chandeliers Tarzan style. He stared dumbly down at himself for a few seconds, wondering why it had taken him this long to notice, before snapping himself out of it, realizing that it didn't matter. He made a pivoting turn and hurried off in the direction of Connie's apartment. He had to get to her. Just as he jumped out onto the first darkened street, Stephen heard the sudden scream of, "There he is!" He whirled around, just in time to see none other than Bluebird's stocky, splotch-faced figure flying around the corner. Her sharp, watery wings flapped faster and faster, zooming towards him, the roar of an excited mob following her attack. Raw fear sliced up through him at the sight of them. This was the worst time this could have happened. The worst time. His gem practically sang with thoughts of its own, just as it had a few seconds ago. Destroy the threats. They will never listen to you. I can do this for you. No! He shouted, cutting it off, the pavement around his feet rupturing into hundreds of jagged cracks. He didn't know how it was speaking. He didn't know why this was happening to him. He just knew that he had to stop it. Leave me alone! Don't hurt them! He didn't fight them. He knew that would lead to nothing but another shattering. Instead, Stephen turned and bolted away into the next alleyway, trying not to think about the fact that his gem was now talking to him in his head. It didn't matter. Nothing mattered. It would all make sense soon. He was fine. Everything was fine. He focused on keeping his mind set on one thing. Connie. The dark of the night would have normally kept Stephen well hidden. However, with his glaringly bright pink skin, he shone like a beacon instead. He might as well be jumping around and yelling. There was no possible way to stop himself from glowing. The terror was clawing into him at all sides, straining every tendon to its limit as he ran, as if that would get him away from his problems. He had to lose the rebels. He couldn't lead them to Connie's home. They'd take her hostage or something. He dove behind a wall, clinging to it, his head pounding with exhaustion, panting hard, trying to look around for a place to hide, his mind racing. He couldn't just duck behind a dumpster. He'd still glow from behind the cracks. Stephen put his hands in his jacket's pocket, trying to hide his shimmering pink head in his sleeves, but that didn't help much either. The light found waves of peeking through the fabric, impossible to hide. Stop glowing! He hissed to himself, trying to keep his knees from shaking. You're gonna give us away! But nothing could stop the pounding panic that had taken a hold of him. Being scared about having to not be scared in time just made him more scared. Scared of being scared. just like Yellow Diamond said. Where could he possibly hide? And besides that, how did Bluebird get here so fast? They'd broken the homeworld warp. Wait, that wasn't the only homeworld warp. There was still one in Little Home School, only a few miles from Beach City. They must have come from there. He hadn't even considered the Little Home School warp. He'd been too distracted by everything else, too tired to think. How could he have forgotten about that? Stephen punched a fist into the side of his head while snapping, "Clotting idiot! Stupid, stupid, stupid!" But he had no time to get mad at himself for his own forgetfulness. He could hear Bluebird's rebellion getting closer and closer, their feet pounding on the pavement. But he couldn't hide with his glow. How could he ever escape them? He wouldn't be able to run for much longer. He was already weakened by the unbearable exhaustion, and the pain in his gem was getting worse by the second. Stephen was staggering up to get ready to try and keep going anyway, whenever he saw the answer. There were the street lights, the occasional car lights, and even a few house lights coming through the windows of the night owls. But the brightest thing here was his dad's car wash. All of the lights were on, the big glass windows on the inside letting all of its shine spill out onto the street. Stephen didn't have to hide his glow, he just had to hide in a place that was just as bright. So, Stephen changed direction, instead darting away towards the car wash like it was the promised land, every inch of his back tingling with urgency. His dad, who was pacing around worriedly, did a double take whenever he saw him. 100 emotions, mostly comprised of worry, relief, and shock, flashed over his face as he said something that he couldn't hear. Stephen slammed to a stop at the glassy front door, knocking frantically, anxiety prickling over his back the longer that he stood out in the open. She could be right behind him, she could be diving to impale him on her icy scabbards, calling up her army. Seeming to sense Stephen's haste, his dad began to hurry over, unlocking and opening the door to let Stephen tumble inside the car wash's control station. Stephen righted himself, barely able to contain his elation as he gasped, "Dad! Stephen, you're back! You're safe!" Despite everything, his dad looked indescribably relieved to see him. "Thank goodness!" He was reaching to hug him, but the glowing boy jumped back out of his range, pulling himself together before he wasted the last few seconds that he had. "I don't have any time to explain," Stephen squeaked, diving under the counter behind some boxes. He was right about before. The LED lights of the car wash were just bright enough to hide his own neon pink glow. "Just please, don't tell Bluebird I'm here!" "What?" his dad began, his hand brushing through his shortened hair. "Bluebird? You mean the..." Yes, the fusion. She's back and she's chasing me." Stephen broke off with a strangled cry of pain, his arms tucking tighter around his belly as it flared in a horrible wave. "Stephen? What's going on? Are you hurt?" His dad's fear only increased from that, the concern frenzied. "I'm fine, everything's fine, but I'm not here," Stephen insisted. The dizzying pain was making it hard to think straight, which in turn made him sound less and less convincing. He clamped a hand over his alien eyes to try and hide them, since his sunglasses had fallen off a long time ago, praying that his dad wouldn't notice the strange shape. His dad still looked very confused. "But, wait, where have you... Hey, my dad!" The shout from outside was unmistakably Bluebird's. Stephen snapped into silence, his dad straightening up from the counter abruptly. He breathed in and out a few times, obviously trying not to look down to where his son was hiding. He prayed that his dad would just play along. And then, Stephen watched his legs begin to approach the door. He clenched up in fear, trying to whisper, "Wait, no. But it was too late. His dad had stepped past the doorframe to where the dangerous, murderous Bluebird was outside. He shrank back, a hand squeezed over his mouth, horror flooding through him like a hailstorm as he heard his dad stammer. Yeah? Tell us where Stephen is!" His heart dropped. Of course Bluebird would think to check with his dad. I don't know," he replied. "I haven't seen him for days." "Liar!" "No, really," his dad said, adding a push of concern to his words. "We've been looking all over for him. Do you know where he ran off to?" Bluebird sighed a huff of disappointment, hissing, Useless!" Stephen stiffened as he heard a slash and a yelp from Greg, as if she had taken a swipe at him. Stephen felt a flare of defensiveness swell in him, his warped magic heating up in his fingers, a dark thought whispering over the others. If she does anything to my dad, this time I really will shatter her. Stephen froze after that, shaking that idea away. No, he couldn't. But for his dad, maybe. Luckily, for both her sake and his own, she didn't have time to push for more answers. He heard her retreating with a flap of her watery wings. Then he heard more footsteps, his dad running back to him, crouching down to where he was, his eyes wild with fear but teary with relief. "Are you okay?" Stephen gasped out. It didn't look like Bluebird had heard him. "Am I okay?" his dad began, as if that was the last thing that was on his mind. "Yes? Are you okay? What's going on? You're glowing again, and why is Bluebird—" "I'm fine." Stephen's voice cracked even as he said it. "This isn't important, just a little disagreement. I'll sort it out soon. It's on my list. Nothing to worry about." He had to get away from his dad. He had to get to Connie. Bluebird wouldn't be fooled for long. Stephen tried to push past him, but his dad jumped to block him, saying, "Wait, no, please, don't go again. Where have you been?" "Nowhere, just took a trip to Homeworld," Stephen explained, trying to appear as normal as possible, despite the fact that his eyes were the complete wrong shape and color. He was glowing, he hadn't slept in days, and was currently running on one sandwich. Or, actually, what he managed to get out of it before he'd thrown it up in the tub. His dad continued, "But you look awful. Do you need anything? You must be hungry by now. Do you want me to go get you something to eat? We could talk about it over dinner, or late dinner." Even at the mention of food, his stomach rumbled out a complaint, feeling like a hollow cave below his ribcage. He was right. He was very hungry now that his attention was drawn to it. That sandwich wasn't nearly enough to keep him going the whole night, and seemed centuries away. But he had no time to eat. He had no time for anything. He had to get to Connie. Stephen tried to push it down, attempting again to escape him to no avail. "No, it's all okay. I'm good. It's just weird new powers. Gem stuff. I'm fixing it right now. Don't worry." "But wait, Stephen, I'm so confused. His dad shook his head, the bewilderment muddling his gaze. "What's happening to you? I feel like something's going on, and every time I see you, it's gotten worse. You keep disappearing for days. You're glowing, and the gems are saying you've been hiding from them, too." He sighed in exasperation, dragging a hand down his face. He reached out and grabbed Stephen's shoulders, looking him in the eye, his tone softening to a concerned marsh. "Look, just, if you need to tell me something, I'll listen, all right?" Stephen's gem was tingling from the contact. He could feel that it wanted to snap at the older man to make him go away. Stephen knew that if he tried to open up, even a little bit, all of this horrible pressure would just be passed on to his dad. And if things went worse, which they usually did, Stephen would end up having another outburst and nearly killing him. His dad was full human. He was so fragile compared to Stephen. If he did something like whenever he crashed the van again, he might not be so lucky a second time. He couldn't let that happen again. But his dad's eyes were filled with trembling concern, reaching out to him from beyond the glass that he built around himself, wanting for his son to be honest. Stephen wanted so badly to break down, to collapse in his dad's arms and blurt out everything that was happening. He wanted to tell him about Bluebird, about his gem, about what he'd seen on the TV's reflection. He wanted to just be his dad's son so badly that it hurt his chest in every imaginable way. But Stephen couldn't let him know. He couldn't let himself hurt anybody else. So Stephen made his face freeze over, letting it become a grinning mask. "There's nothing to listen to," Stephen began. He was fighting so hard against his own emotions that all he could muster was a strained expression coupled with a forced smile. "Everything's fine." He brushed his dad's hand off and headed for the back door. "No, it's clearly not," his dad tried. But Stephen was already gone, rushing away towards Connie's house.